Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time we are headed to the North Atlantic to catch up on the latest news from Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands.
It's a region that's always fascinating to watch.
For sure. I mean, you got elections brewing, tech deals going down, and even a little bit of a sanitation snafu at a world-famous national park.
Well, it sounds like we've got a pretty packed agenda.
We do. Let's jump right in with Iceland, shall we? Visor has been all over these upcoming elections, and from what I'm reading, things could get interesting.
I'm seeing the same thing.
The Socialist Party, they're gaining some serious momentum, which
Mm.
is kind of surprising considering Iceland already has, a pretty robust social safety net.
Yeah, when we talk about Iceland's social safety net, we're talking about a well-established welfare state, universal health care and generous parental leave and all that good stuff.
Right. So this surge in support for the Socialist Party, is it a sign that some Icelanders are maybe pushing for even more economic equality?
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the election. But hey, it's not all politics in Iceland.
Oh, definitely not.
There's some big news in the tech world, too.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Remember Controlant, the company that does all that high-tech tracking and monitoring of shipments, like pharmaceuticals and stuff?
Yeah. They're the ones doing all the fancy stuff with sensors and data, right?
Exactly. Well, they just landed a massive investment deal, huge vote of confidence.
Wow. Who's investing?
Well, even pension funds are getting in on the action, which is a big deal. But it also kind of shows how Iceland's reputation as a tech hub is growing, particularly in data and logistics, which is super important these days.
It's amazing to see how Iceland is making a name for itself in tech while still being, Iceland with all its natural beauty.
Right. And speaking of natural beauty, did you see that story about Shingvellir National Park?
You mean the unpleasant sanitation issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Even UNESCO World Heritage Sites aren't immune to, the realities of being popular tourist destinations.
Haha, exactly. It's a good reminder that some things are universal.
All right, let's hop over to Greenland. Now, KNR has been highlighting how closely Greenlanders are watching the U.S. presidential election.
Makes sense given their history and their location.
Yeah, Vivian Motzfeldt, who's a prominent Greenlandic politician, said that they'll work with whoever wins, but Greenland's interests always come first.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? I mean, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but they also have their own parliament and a growing sense of independence.
Right, and their location in the Arctic makes their relationship with the U.S. pretty important strategically.
For sure. There's potential for cooperation on things like defense and resource development, but they also want to chart their own course.
Absolutely. Speaking of charting their own course, there's also been some concern about the health of Greenland's shrimp population.
Oh, right, the shrimp.
It's a major part of their economy, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And there's been talk that the government might be considering fishing quotas that go against scientific advice.
That's a tough one. How do you balance the immediate needs of the economy with, long-term sustainability? Especially in a place like Greenland, where the environment is so central to their way of life.
It's a classic dilemma and one that a lot of countries are facing.
All right, for our last stop in part one of our North Atlantic tour, we're heading to the Faroe Islands. They're known for their incredible landscapes and rugged beauty, but they're also making headlines for a massive infrastructure project.
Oh, yeah, the tunnel.
They're really pushing forward with this plan to build an undersea tunnel connecting the island of Suðuroy to the rest of the archipelago.
It's a huge undertaking, both financially and logistically.
I was reading in KVF.FO that there have been some political hurdles and technical challenges, but it sounds like they're determined to make it happen.
It's a good example of how infrastructure can really be a driver of economic development.
They're hoping it'll boost the economy of Suðuroy and make life easier for people living there.
Right. But these kinds of projects always come with complex considerations, too. Things like the environmental impact and how it might affect traditional ways of life.
It really makes you think, how will something like this shape the future of the Faroe Islands? Not just economically, but culturally, too.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
For sure.
It's not just about, the practical stuff, either.
What do you mean?
This tunnel project, I think it sparked some interesting conversations about how it might, affect Faroe's culture.
That's a good point. The Faroe Islands, they have this strong sense of tradition, right? They're close-knit communities and that deep connection to the land and sea. It makes you wonder how easier access to and from Suðuroy will change things.
Yeah, will it change things too much? Some people are worried about outside influences.
It's kind of like a microcosm of what's happening all over the world, right? Trying to balance progress and preserving what makes a place special.
Totally. And speaking of showcasing Faroese culture, did you see that story about the dance group?
Oh, yeah. Revier.
They're getting international recognition.
I know. It's so cool how they take inspiration from the island's landscapes and folklore, but they give it this modern twist. It's proof that creativity can thrive anywhere.
It really is. And it shows how the Faroe Islands are evolving while still holding on to their roots.
Makes me want to go visit.
Me too. But for now, we've got lots more to cover in our deep dive.
All right, so we've talked about elections, tech, the environment, and even dance. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, one thing's for sure, this region is facing some of the same challenges as the rest of the world. Political shifts, economic uncertainty, the environment, globalization, all that.
But they're also tackling these challenges in their own way,
Yeah.
using their history, their culture, and their connection to nature to guide them.
Right. Like in Iceland, they're wrestling with income inequality and what role the government should play.
In Greenland, they're trying to balance cooperation with powerful countries while still asserting their independence. Plus, they have to make tough choices about managing resources like the shrimp population.
And the Faroe Islands, they're ambitious. They want to improve things for their people with projects like the tunnel, but they're also thinking carefully about how those projects might impact their culture.
These islands might seem remote, but they're connected to the rest of the world in so many ways, and what happens there matters.
Absolutely. Their stories give us a glimpse into the complex issues we're all dealing with.
And it's inspiring to see their creativity and resilience.
Totally. Now, before we jump into the last part of our deep dive, anything else that really stood out to you this week?
You know what? I keep thinking about that story from Iceland about the sanitation issue at Heimdallr National Park. It seems like a small thing, but it kind of makes you think.
I know what you mean. Like, even the most beautiful places can be affected by humans, especially with tourism on the rise.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to protect these places. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us.
It's about finding a way to enjoy these places without destroying them.
Right. Sustainability is about more than just the environment. It's about finding a balance between what we need and preserving what's special about a place, both the nature and the culture.
And that balance is becoming even more important as the world gets smaller and more people have access to these places.
For sure. All right, let's move on to the final part of our North Atlantic deep dive. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up this North Atlantic deep dive. It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it? From elections in Iceland to tunnels in the Faroe Islands.
And everything in between. We've covered a lot of ground. But I think it's safe to say that this region is going to be one to watch,
Yeah.
in the coming years, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as the Arctic becomes more and more important.
Geopolitically, economically, you name it, these countries are going to be right at the heart of it all.
And facing some pretty major global issues, too.
Climate change, resource management, figuring out how to deal with powerful countries like the U.S., it's a lot to juggle.
It makes you realize that what happens in these places, Iceland, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, it doesn't stay there. Their decisions have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. What might seem like, I don't know, a far-off corner of the world is actually really connected to all of us.
It's a good reminder to, well, pay attention.
Right, exactly. These nations might be small, but they're dealing with some really big questions. Questions that have global implications.
They're coming up with some really innovative solutions.
They are. They're pioneers in a lot of ways. So yeah, pay attention in the North Atlantic. Their stories are important.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. But as you go about your day, reading the news and learning about the world, just remember every region, every country has something unique to offer.
That's a great way to put it.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.